just bouncing her to get her back to sleep. Okay, she's gone back off. I just can't find time to film these videos in the day because having 2 children under 3 years old is just really hard to find time. Here goes an evening session. I've got my coffee ready. I just wanted to say, as I was doing this study and the Lord was speaking to me, I realised how profound and how deep wisdom is, because I feel I've only just like scraped the surface. God's wisdom is just so rich and so deep and so profound that honestly I could do a video until the rest of my life about wisdom and I probably still wouldn't be anywhere close. So I could just talk about so much in this video, but I'm going to mainly focus on one specific topic, and that obviously is just wisdom. So there's a proverb that says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I really wanted to delve deep in this video about what I believe wisdom is and the ways we can apply it as Christians and the ways we can learn from foolishness as Christians as well. There's a contrast between wisdom and foolishness. Disclosure, I'm really tired and I was woken pretty much all night last night, so if my words fumble, blame Ada. But I came to the conclusion of like there's 3 different types of people through the book of Proverbs. Very clear distinction of people, and that was a foolish person, a wicked person, and a wise person. And that kind of theme throughout Proverbs is running, you know. And as I was reading the book of James chapter 3, I see the kind of similarities there. So I'm just going to break down the 3 categories that I've got. The first type of wisdom, if you will, that I discovered is intellectual wisdom. Let's read James chapter 3 verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but it's earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there will be disorder in every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. The first kind of interpretation of wisdom that I discovered was someone that is intellectually wise. I'm talking about a God-given smartness and intelligence, or the ability to reason and the skill to have critical thinking and like a developed understanding of things and insight. This kind of person, I feel, is commonly associated with people in like philosophy or psychology, and those kind of people are seen and deemed as wise. Now there is a scripture that says, you know, you'd have to be a fool to believe, to say in your heart there is no God. And I believe even down to the root and origins of philosophy, you have to believe that there is a possibility of God, because it would seem illogical to not. You know, you see the evidence of life, therefore something has to create it. We see human beings create human beings. Logically, you don't look at a baby and go, oh, I wonder where that came from. You know that the baby came through a mother. Through creation, there's got to be a creator. So it's the same principle, I feel, in philosophy, is that it would be a foolish thing to say that there is no God. However, obviously, some philosophers do argue against that. But I'm not here for the debate. That was just the point that I was making. But it led me to this verse here, is live in harmony with one another, not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honourable in the sight of all. And what really stuck with me in this verse, never be wise in your own sight. The Christian relies on God for our sense of direction, for our sense of correction, for our sense of logic and love. If we rely on what we deem as moral and morally correct, that's how things go wrong in the first place, because our morals are not God's morals naturally. So this verse, I feel, is interlinked with the one I just read. Proverbs 12:15 says, "The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult." Just quickly here, it says the way of a fool is right in his own eyes. We were listening to Aaron preach on Sunday, and he was saying, if you feel you don't want to go to people about getting advice for certain things, generally that is an indicator that you just don't want to hear the truth. You don't want to hear someone tell you no, or this isn't a good idea, X, Y, and Z, because you want to do what you deem as right in your life and in your own eyes. But we make the plans and God directs the steps. Wisdom would say, go to people because they may protect you from things that you may not see. The aspect of listening. As Christians, it's so easy to speak and not to listen. It's a real hard thing to grasp, to be honest. This is something so simple, but it's so important as a Christian to remember, is to listen to the advice. Listen to people. Show them honour, show them respect by listening. Someone who is a fool, or deemed as a fool in the Bible, is someone that gets easily angered and irritated and offended very quickly. That is not a wise thing to do. If you are constantly offended by what people do or what people say, and you're acting on that and you're in your feels all the time, that is not a godly thing. I'm just going to put it out there. I've felt it before. I've done this before. I am still probably going to experience it at some point, but I know that it's not a godly thing to stay offended or be offended constantly by things. A wise person ignores an insult. It's important we show godliness in the home just as much as it is out of the home, and I feel sometimes I can be more comfortable in my home to express my opinion, express my anger and my frustration and how I feel. And God's just kind of been revealing to me lately, like, Hayley, this cannot continue. And obviously there is a comfortability there and a contentment at home, which isn't a bad thing, you know, it's good to be honest. But there's a tendency to allow sin to creep in quicker if you're not guarding yourself against these things like anger and foolishness. In terms of what I was referencing earlier of philosophy, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. I'm just going to bring it down to what happens in our day. Are people that make decisions based upon their feelings and not facts or truth. We currently have so many issues especially in the UK right now. They exchange the truth for a lie. But in this specific verse, they exchanged the glory of a mortal God for images resembling mortal man. So they created things like idols. In our current day, people worship themselves and they are their own God. And it's a self-entitlement and indulgence that's currently sweeping the UK right now. So people still worship, they just worship themselves or their beliefs. Kind of linking into that, I've got 1 Corinthians 3, verse 18. Let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you thinks that he is wise in this age, let him become a fool, that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is folly with God. For it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are futile. So this is a really deep verse. And bearing in mind, this was Paul sending this to the Corinthian church. This is to Christians. There's so many ways a Christian can become puffed up. The issue with that is you're deceiving yourself, that you're thinking more of yourself than what you should. Which is why Paul said, if anyone among you thinks that he is wise in this age, let him become a fool. Basically, he's saying, let him be humbled so that he can gain wisdom, because he's not going to gain any more wisdom being prideful or arrogant. God has to remove the weed in order to let the flower grow. And it's the same thing for us spiritually. If we want to gain wisdom, we can't gain wisdom if we're acting as if it's ourselves and if we're acting prideful or arrogant. In order for God to work, you need a humble heart. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are futile. The most smartest people on this planet have actually been humbled by God. And then they've turned around and realized that God exists. But God had to allow them in their worldly wisdom to get to that point of where they've searched so much for wisdom and they've gained nothing. But also he knows the thoughts of those people. He knows the hearts of those men. Let us not become conceited in our own thinking as Christians. The next point I have is earthly wisdom. Who is the first person that rebelled against God? Satan. The first thing that Satan did and had in his heart was pride. He said, the 5 I wills, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will also sit on the mount of the congregations in the sides of the north, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High. What did he tempt Eve with? If you take this fruit and eat of it, you will be like God. He tempted her with pride. As I mentioned earlier, there was a video I was watching which confirmed that I was going to talk about it tonight. Is about Job. And this is the verse, Job 1:7. The Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and turns away from evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for no reason? And then have you put a hedge around him, etc., etc. It's God that actually says, this is my servant who fears me and turns away from evil. But then Satan says and comes back, but he only fears you because of these things. We as Christians should not fear God because of what we have and what we see and what we feel. The fear of God is someone who loves him regardless of whatever the situation. And it's a good thing to challenge ourselves and ask ourselves, you know, if I didn't have what I have, would I still love God? Would I still believe in him? To move on with that kind of narration, Satan has really full throttled trying to get him to sin and turn against God. But when Job's friends come along and they're like, you know, we think you've sinned and this is why God is doing this to you, this is what Job responds with. Chapter 13, oh that you would keep silent and it would be your wisdom. My battery's about to die. I'll have to pause myself there and I'll return to you tomorrow to carry on. Okay, it's not in fact the next day, it's like the following day because I couldn't get the time to do it yesterday. As you may hear, I have got Ada with me again today. So if you hear baby noises in the back, you know why. But I'm going to try my best to continue where I left off. Job's responding to his friends and he says, I am not inferior to you, which implies that the friends have a level of pride. When we look at Jesus's reaction, who is our perfect example, he remains silent, which links on to my next point. And the third point I have is heavenly wisdom. And as I was saying before, we're looking at how through being silent there is wisdom. And if we look at a godly example of this, it would be Jesus himself. Matthew 26:63, it says, but Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. A lot of times throughout the New Testament, Jesus actually just says, you have said so. And he hasn't actually spoken much. The difference with Jesus and Job is Job tries to argue his case. And the difference with Jesus is he knows their hearts. When someone's set out to do evil and to think evil, and he knows their evil thoughts, there is no point of rebuking a scoffer. There is no point of rebuking someone who has the level of pride that they have. They're not going to be willing to accept correction. They're not going to be willing to even give you an opportunity to change their mind because they've already made it up. And that's the wisdom of Christ. He is confident in the Father, knowing that this is what he's called him to do. He doesn't need to justify his point. He himself is justified. Notice the way that they try and get him to talk and respond is, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And I believe he responds at that point. And he says something like, you have said so. So if he's remained silent to the high priest at one point, now he's remaining silent to Pilate. And he says in Mark 15 verse 3, and the chief priests accused him of many things, and Pilate asked him again, have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you. But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. Jesus just doesn't need to satisfy the flesh, that he knows when to speak and when to be quiet, and he adopts that characteristic of he actually remained silent when there is a time to be silent. And how many times as Christians do we not keep to that? You know, like where we feed the fire and we get into meaningless debates and argue our point because we feel justified and we feel right. Jesus was perfectly justified, yet he still remained silent. Definitely something I'm praying about, because guys, in marriage, remaining silent when you feel like you're in the right is the hardest thing to do. Why Jesus not responding? It says Pilate was amazed. If we are in the fruits and we are living according to the Spirit and we respond like this, we can amaze some people, guys. That's so cool. I feel like this is a good indicator of spiritual maturity, because on the flip side of this, in Proverbs 29:11, it says, a fool gives vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. Proverbs 18:2 says, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. In another verse, it talks about having to avoid quarrels and unhealthy debates. I can't remember the word. I think it's foolish controversy. And there is a time for debates, because through debates you can defend the gospel and hopefully, you know, bring someone to Christ in a debate. Debates aren't the unhealthy thing. Foolish debates are the unhealthy things. Investing so much time into something that's unnecessary and not building up the church or encouraging others or being peaceable amongst people. And a fool takes no pleasure in understanding. The truth is, Jesus became so low, lower than the angels. He was born in a stable. No pride was found in him. And there is wisdom in not expressing your own opinion and sometimes just keeping it quiet. To add to that, Proverbs 1:7 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So a godly person doesn't despise wisdom and instruction. They in fact welcome it. They welcome correction. They welcome instruction and wisdom. Oh, did you like that one? If we have the fear of the Lord, we love to receive wisdom and instruction. And if you feel you're lacking wisdom, this is what God says to do. In James 1:5, if any one of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. If you are feeling you're lacking wisdom or you're struggling in this area, just ask God and he gives generously. If there was a personal application to heavenly wisdom, it would be personally for me to grow in the fruits of the Spirit, which is Galatians 5:22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. I would do this with this verse. I would go through and say, is the Spirit working in me, showing love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and then going through those things and then putting the ones you feel you're strongest in and the ones you feel you're weakest in, because then God can do a work in you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. God tells us plainly, get wisdom. Just to end, there is nothing wrong with intelligence and intellect and all of these kind of skills that we do have, that God has blessed us with. There's nothing wrong with them. It's the direction of our hearts and where we're looking to is the problem. Guys, I can't believe I actually managed to get that done, because I've got to run up and see to Evie now because she needs me. But I thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what your favourite verse is about wisdom, because there is so many, so I would actually love to know. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.